Hello, my name is Harri Hursti. I'm a founding partner of Nordic Innovation Labs. Nordic Innovation Labs is a security consultancy and skunkworks company. One of our practices is election security. As Brian mentioned, right now in YouTube there's an HBO documentary we released in 26th of March, and they decided because of the coronavirus situation that the movie is now without subscription available for viewing in YouTube. So let me tell a little bit of the story, how we got here, what is the situation of election security, and how horribly things are wrong and have not been progress. This movie, Kill Chain, Cyber War and American Elections, is a sequel to a movie, Hacking Democracy, released by HBO 2006. I got involved in election without my interest 2004. I was going around the world. I had sold my companies, traveled around the world backpacking, ended up to California, and I was asked if I would be interested to take a look and hack voting machines. And I said, absolutely not. However, I was given a primary. I was explained what the people who were asking me thought election security to be and the problems. And I couldn't believe any of that. Basically, I walk away saying off to Tahiti, but whoever has been briefing you, that cannot be true. We are not living in that kind of world anymore. We are not in such a dark ages of technology. Well, it took about a year for me. People were pestering me, asking me again and again if I would be interested to take a look, and eventually then I gave it and say, well, fine. I will, in order to get rid of you guys, I will set up an impossible set of rules. And I thought, I'm done now. It's not going to happen. I'm free from this. And what happened was that Leon County, Tallahassee, Florida, the capital of Florida, the election supervisor, Ian Sancho, who is also present in the movie, sent me an invitation and asked me if I would be interested to come to see the system he is using. I came along, first tried to say, well, maybe you want to have someone more current because I'm retired. But eventually I flew to Tallahassee, took a look in the system, found easily a couple of ways how the central tabulator can be manipulated. But I told Ian, this is not elegant. This leaves a breadcrumbs. This leaves a forensic evidence. And Ian was asking me if there's a more elegant way. And I said, absolutely, I don't know. But if there is one, looking the architecture you have, it has to be this memory card. And Ian had been ready for that thinking because he had heard about how I generally think, and said, well, that's too bad. This memory card is proprietary technology by the voting technology vendor, which I had to tell him, no, it's not. I have seen this guy before. This memory card definitely is not developed on them. And we agreed that we will sleep on it for a few weeks and take a look. And it just took 2 days or 3 days. And Ian called me and said, well, actually, when the Supreme Court of Florida stopped my recount, because he was the guy who was responsible for the infamous pregnant Chad, a hanging Chad recount. He said, well, when Supreme Court stopped my recount, I didn't get my answers. So either you take a look and analyze this and find out what was going on, or find me someone who will. And I did the thing which I always do very well, drink a lot of beer. And I had a beer or 10 and had an idea, pulled out the original patent of laptop computer by Tandy. And that patent predates floppy drives. So this memory card happens to be the floppy drive of the patent. Found out it's made by Epson, called Epson. Long story short, found a company in Minnesota called CropScan who was spraying corn with the isotope and measuring the decay, and they still use this same memory card. So I called them, asked for memory card reader, and found out the contents. And what I found out is that there was a executable code as a tokenized interpreted their own flavor of BASIC residing on the memory card. At that time, the certification for the voting machines, and it still has, there's a ban that no executable code can be put in the removable medium. So this machine was clearly certified while it didn't conform with the requirements put forward by the certification process. I found it was trivially easy to manipulate the card, and on it went. We after that had the vendor trying to deny this. The Secretary of State California ordered UC Berkeley to verify or debunk my findings. They found my findings are right, and rest is history. The California top to bottom review happened, where Secretary of State California ordered every system used in California to be inspected. Subsequently, Everest happened. Everest was Secretary of State Ohio, Jennifer Brunner at the time, who ordered all the systems to be inspected, which are used in Ohio. And since there's an overlapping, Everest study verified all the findings of the California top to bottom review. So in end of 2007, when Everest report was submitted and published, the redacted version of that PDF is about 335 pages, and typically more than one vulnerability per page, and only 3 systems. We thought this problem gets fixed now. This is going to be solved one way or another. And we couldn't have been more wrong. The same versions of software which were used back those days and which were published, those same versions are still in use. There haven't been implemented software patches. It's just the same. Not only those same versions are still in use, but those versions are also deployed still. There are still new jurisdictions starting to use those same versions. So this was a shock to us as a security community, because we really had a naive thinking 2007, 2008. Once we expose this problem, the problem will be fixed. After that, there have been newer systems coming into the market, but there has been no sweeping security study conducted in the United States since Everest. So the last study looking for all systems used in a state, or any sweeping study having more than independent study to have looked to any of the systems, was done in 2008. And really, it is a sad state of affairs that that study is still so relevant. A lot of things has happened since. We have been having a good progress of getting rid of DRAs, direct recording voting machines, which are electronic voting machines directly recording the votes only in digital form. The transition to paper ballot, which is today the only technology we have, which we can securely use in elections, that transition has been going on and picking up a steam, especially now. At the same time, there are negative movements in the marketplace. First negative movement is a rise of election services companies. Election services companies are a small, typically local companies which sit between the election vendor and the local jurisdictions. A commonly used phrase in public is to claim that the US election system is protected by diversity, both diversity by variety of machines and systems in use, but also because it's not known there are so many systems in use and there's no single point of failure. Both of the claims are wrong. There has been a market consolidation, and right now, give or take 90% of the market is controlled by 3 companies as the election technology vendors. There's an intermediate layer, and the election services companies are the intermediate layer, and we don't even know how many they are. Give or take 30 is the best guess we have today. And the election services companies are doing the election programming for the jurisdictions. Since the election services companies don't have any requirement of disclosure, it's very typical that election Secretary of State doesn't even know the extent the state is using election services companies to perform the mission critical, the national security critical element of every election. I was recently working for a Secretary of State in Midwest, in one of the swing states, and that state has over 100 counties. When we started looking how the elections are conducted in that state, we found out that the 2 of the counties programmed their own elections. Everyone else was using 2 service companies. And generally speaking, the reason why nobody understood how widespread the election services companies were was because the Secretary of State have tried to collect the information from the state by sending questionnaires to the counties. And the counties, of course, didn't know, because they have outsourced everything, how to respond to these questionnaires, and hence all the documents were handed over to the election service company to respond on behalf of the jurisdiction. And of course, as a result, the existence of the companies were kind of omitted. So this is really explaining how we have a secondary layer of companies which have no requirements of security. And in this case, the secretary tried to get me in to either of the 2 companies for over a year to make a security review how they conduct their operation. And neither of the 2 companies, they use every single avenue to stop and block the secretary to send me or anyone else to inspect their facilities to see how the elections are, how the election program is conducted. There's a recent lawsuit in Georgia where the judge ordered the system used in Georgia to be completely replaced. And some of the findings in that judge's opinion are kind of striking. First of all, the state had a number of times claimed that their system has been upgraded and their system has been mitigated against the vulnerabilities I have found in the very system they have been using. And what was disclosed and found was that actually they still used older version than what was the version I had been studying. So no upgrades whatsoever had been happening since 2005 in the system, which is still in use, and it's going to be replaced right now. The second part was that it was found out that the vendor had been programming and performing mission critical election specific programming for the machines, and they found out that the people who conducted the actual work were 3 people who were working from their homes and then uploading over the internet the data to the Secretary of State's office. And this is the critical information, critical programming, which was telling the voting machines what the ballot looks like, how to interpret the voter intent, etc., etc. So I don't even want to start how many best practices that is violating. But it's demonstrating that the public statements about why we should be trusting the election security are completely false. These service companies are typically literally couple of guys and a dog in a strip mall. When I say strip mall, I have been walking to these places to see what they actually look like. When I say a strip mall, that's not figure of speech. It's a couple of companies are literally on a rundown strip mall where everybody has been, shop has been leaving, and it's now converted to office space. It's very typical these companies have all their employees on the web explaining who they are, what they love, what not, all the contact information. I spoke with the owner of one of the companies, and it was very interesting conversation because I was asking, what is the churn rate of your employees? And the answer was, we are a university state. There's a lot of, we have a better university than neighboring states. We have a lot of people who move in for university, work for us for a few years, and then they move out. All right, reasonable. So you have a high churn rate. So what is your background check process? And the answer was, we are a small state. We know everybody who lives here. If we want to know, we will know who you dated in high school. And so we have no problem. So, well, so you don't have a background check process. Well, he was asking then from his CEO, they would go back and forth. No, actually, a few years back, we ran a credit check on one of the prospective employees because we were feeling something weird. So these service companies, which are the cornerstone of the national security operations, that's the level of how they are guarding their own shop. So no wonder why they don't want to have people walking in and inspecting how the systems are performing, how the election is conducted. So this is really a overview of the procedural side and how the technology being deployed into the field is vulnerable in a number of different ways. Not only that there is problems in the system itself, but there's problems in how the process is working. We have been overlooking and emphasizing the voting system. We have been looking the voting terminal. We have been looking and talking about voting terminal. We have been looking about the ballot casting. First of all, election environment has a myriad of technology, especially since the Help America Vote Act of 2002. A huge amount of technology has been pouring. We have a mental image that there is a election office. Election office has an IT department, and the IT department hopefully has a security practice. As you probably already figured out from the talk about outsourcing, this whole image is wrong. It's quite typical that election office don't have a single full-time person. A lot of the work is carried out by volunteers and outsourcing. So from that perspective, there is no security practice unless you are one of the very low number of exceptionally large and exceptionally aware election jurisdictions. This is a systematic problem which is caused by lack of resources. The election offices are massively underfunded, massively under-resourced, and don't have an access to knowledge and technology. And really, when you look all the technology which has poured into the area, from voter registration systems, which have to be in internet by definition, to electronic poll book systems, to disclosure databases, campaign financing databases, which are sometimes managed by the state or county, to everything related to the election process and the election reporting and all of that part, you really should have an IT department with a strong security practice, which just happens to do elections. But that is not a reality. And again, as we all know, as a security practitioners, the world is very asymmetric. Right now, we don't expect if a foreign nation shows up with the land invasion force, with the tanks, we don't expect the local sheriff to be defending the land against the foreign invasion. But that's really the case where we are right now. It's a local election official with no resources who are directly fighting against a possible foreign nation, massively funded, massively motivated, highly motivated adversary who has all the luxury and time to look at and find out what is the best attack strategy. When we look what has happened, what we publicly known in the previous election hacks, we also have to recognize that there's very little evidence that the actual election system, which is processing the votes, have been compromised. There are few reasons for that. One of the reasons is that nobody has really been looking for forensic evidence. But even if somebody would be looking for forensic evidence in that part, these systems really don't have a capability of recording and protecting any meaningful audit information or forensically important information. So a lot of times I would also argue that even if you try to take a look into the evidence, the problem is that there is no evidence which is trustworthy and worth analyzing. So for that reason, when we look at everything what has been happening and have been reported, that is mainly the backend systems. Whether it's a voter registration database, whether e-poll book systems, etc. We started voting machine hacking village at DEF CON 3 years ago. And the reason why we started is because two things happened. We found voting machines in eBay and in government surplus stores, and we got a Digital Millennium Copyright Act exempt allowing bona fide a security research of voting machines. And the DMC had been previously the blunt weapon used by election industry to create a chilling effect and stop people looking at voting technology and trying to figure out what are the security properties of those. There have been a lot of misconceptions what security research are and claiming, can you show how the actual votes are changed? What you are opening the voting machines, and everything is unrealistic because you can open the voting machine in a real polling place. You wouldn't be able to. There will be locks and keys and seals and whatnot. Again, not true. One of the outtakes from the movie, and there's when you have to pack so much information, almost 4 years of research, 4 years of filming around the world to basically 91 minutes, a lot of very important things and very important stories have remained to be untold. One of the outtakes was we went to a real special election, and people were really nice and really trying to do the good work. They just didn't know. They haven't been told and educated how to do the work, but they were trying to do everything they can. So we were filming, there were voting machines, and people were wandering around. And I realized that knowing that particular voting machine, the seal of the most critical part of the voting machine was broken. And the little lid under which was the most critical parts of the machine that was a little bit cracked open. So broken seal, cracked open lid. I picked up the election judge and the precinct chief and went to talk in front of the voting machine. And I was trying to guide and see what time they will pick up that the security seals are broken. After 5 minutes or 10 minutes, nothing happened. So eventually I was like, the seal is broken and the lid is open. It's not even locked. There's a lock, so it's open. And the election judge was, oh, don't worry about it. We stopped sealing this years ago. We had all the time the problem that the seals were broken in transit and caused problems because people were calling the broken seals. We had the risk. So we stopped sealing those years ago. Those are from previous elections. So that's nothing to do with this election. It's fine. Again, that's the reality of physical security in the election. So the main arguments which has been used and served to general public why voting machines are safe, one by one, when you take a look into those are fundamentally broken. And it's not because maliciousness, it's just because of lack of understanding what the security is, and it's because of the voting technology vendors have been making false claims, also saying this is completely secure and you don't need to worry about it. So we have a problem there. Now, when we look the current affairs and we look what is happening with the coronavirus, right now the newest technology, and by the way, as I said before, the only way to securely have an election is paper ballot. So the new push of technology has been to introduce ballot marking devices. So put another computer between the voter and the vote. Some of the machines are something what we lovingly call license to cheat machines, because you make your choices and before it prints out the ballot, it asks, do you want to see the paper ballot? And if you say no, it prints and it directly drops it without physically on a different paper transmission method to ballot box. So the voter has no way of knowing what actually was printed. And of course, since you already have waived your right to inspect the voting machine if should there be malicious software, already knows there's a single chance of being detected. Other part is that using a barcodes has been introduced. So the ballots sometimes have barcodes, only barcodes, a barcode and human readable. The problem there is that the barcode itself is encoded. So even if you read the barcode with, say, mobile phone, you cannot verify if the human readable text is matching the barcode content. And just to make bad things worse, many states have been now starting to introduce a new regulation saying the barcode is actually the vote of record. So even in the case of audit or recount, that is going to be done by machine by reading the barcodes. So the human readable part is never verified against the barcode. Obviously a very bad idea. Now these machines are touchscreen machines. Well, we can already think how good idea is to share a touchscreen machine in the age of coronavirus, especially because a lot of these touchscreens are plastic coated, not glass coated. So they really have a low tolerance against disinfectant chemicals, which would be used, which would be needed to be used to disinfect the screen between two voters. So we only option really is in that sense is to temporary base go to vote by mail. Vote by mail has its own set of problems, but since there are states which already are doing vote by mail, we have a better understanding what are the real threats, what are the perceived threats, and what are the false claims of threats in that environment. So we know how to, if we need to go that way on temporary basis, how to mitigate against, but there needs to be a mitigation against those, especially the false claims of a malice when it might not have happened. So we have to defend the system against a foreign actor or domestic actor introducing a false claims of foul play when it didn't happen. So we have to be careful. And when we look going forward, we obviously have to improve the technology as much as we can. However, everything we have today, everything we have in a foreseeable future can be hacked. So the key is to audit the results. There is a method which was the current method was coined by Professor Phil Stark of UC Berkeley. He's a professor of statistics. Other person who have been doing a lot of work in this is Ron Rivas, which many of us know. He's the R in RSA algorithm. And the risk limiting audit is a statistical method to audit the results with a very low cost of labor and with the open and transparent process, which also fosters and enables to gain back public confidence. So for risk limiting audit is a statistical method where picking up a small sample, or depending of the margin of victory, a sample of ballots, and using those ballots to gain a predetermined a level of confidence that the election has been picked up the right winner. So it doesn't audit if the results are to the last decimal right, just sees if the winner the election has picked is right. And I would like to now, before 1 minute, to also put a very important thought in everybody's head. Election is the cornerstone of democracy. The purpose and the promise of democracy is a peaceful transition of power. People have a capability to express their desires in election by voting candidates, proposals, ideas, laws. And once that opinion has been cast, once this is done, then there will be a peaceful transition of power. If the voters have asked for new leadership, the new leadership comes in. That is possible only if the candidates, the supporters of the losing candidates and proposals accept the results as free and fair and square. So elections are not actually about who wins. It's about the losers, and it's about how you make elections so trustworthy, so transparent, and so above all the possible dispute that those who in this election didn't get what they wanted still accept the results as fair and square and promote the peaceful, orderly transition of power to the new leaders and the new ideas the people had chosen. I think I'm out of my time now. Thank you for having me.
We have some time for some quick Q&A. So one of them goes back around politics. And from the documentary, it seems that the Republicans are blocking transparency. So is this something that is predominant to a particular party in the United States or a particular ideology globally?
So there's a global movement and that's why not a single party or not a single idea is always behind it. And there's also a global influence when we look the influence ops, when we look how there are adversary parties who are trying to sow distrust, try to make certain that we cannot anymore trust our elections, and therefore we cannot trust the democratic process. So there are in different parts of the world, there are different political ideologies and different parties who are more driving towards keeping the elections closed, trying to block auditability, try to block the transparency, all the way to a possible voter suppression. So this is a global phenomenon, and this is also when you start looking how the messages go, you very quickly see how this is a fundamentally funded by adversary governments in that scene. Of course, in small scene, it is by anything from political action groups to private groups. Also, it's very interesting that when we have been starting looking the bots which are distributing political messages, undermining our trust to democracy, in those studies looking the bots, you find very quickly that the second message very often is anti-vaccination. And this tells about how certain methods are more powerful to destabilize a government. Because again, if you can introduce a health problem and you can collapse the healthcare system, that is another way of showing distrust of the members of the society to the society itself. So there is a strong coupling right now in the psychological influence ops and cyber ops, mating the distrust in election messaging and fake news with a messaging which is destabilizing government by healthcare. And that is one of the reasons, for example, why European Union issued a warning about multi-language attack, which again is carried partially by the same technical platforms as election messages, to try to hamper and stop a orderly and timely response to coronavirus. Very morbid, but a reality which we cannot deny.
If there was a discrepancy in the voting results, is it more likely to presume that the counts communicated do not match the voting machines, or that the voting machines would be tampered with and reporting itself is accurate?
So that's why you need to get the audits, and you have to go end-to-end audit. You have to look the actual paper ballots and compare that to the results reported, because the problem can be in any single step. It can be in the voting machine reporting and calculating the votes wrong. It can be central tabulator being manipulated, or it can be the voter reporting system. And the election night reporting system is a good example of system where the disconnection between the election officials to the general public has been previously hampering the understanding the importance of it. Because what is reported on the election night is unofficial results. And for that reason, in the people who are deeply in the election law and deep in the election process have been thinking, well, that's not important, it's unofficial. But the general public doesn't know it. The media doesn't know it. And if there is a result on the election night, which the when people go to bed are vastly different in the morning, that is causing civil disturbance. We can see riots in countries like Ghana. We can see problems in people like places like Indonesia. We have been having this kind of discrepancy conversations in the United States. So it's very important that the transparency process starts from the actual ballots, ends to the end result, and verifies end to end that the result, both voters' intent and people's feel are represented in the end results.
Well, that's all the time we have for questions here, but you can follow up with Harri on the Discord server in the expert track where he will be to answer some additional questions. Harri, thank you and good to see you again.
Likewise, stay safe, and thank
you
you for having me.